Today we're going to do a book review. I try to keep my book reviews really positive and goofy and friendly. I'm kind of a silly person. Today I'm going to try really hard to do this book justice. It's really an awesome book, and I don't want to goof it up. I don't want to make it seem like it's light or anything, because it is a heavy subject. So today's book review is going to be on the book by Reuben Appelman called The Kill Jar. I would say that this book tackles Appelman's experience chasing the Oakland County child killer, a notorious serial killer from the 70s. And this was about the time that Appelman was a child, and he was, along with the rest of the community, was critically impacted by this killer. And it is still an open case today, although I will say that Appelman has probably pointed the finger at the right guy or guys, but I will not divulge who that is. I won't do any spoilers in this video, so don't worry. So first of all, the misconception. People go into this book thinking they're going to read a true crime. Please don't make that mistake. This is actually a very well-written book, and it is not a true crime book, although the subject is true crime. However, I think Appelman made a really good point last year at a writers' conference. I was the privilege of listening to him speak, and he made a really good point about how true crime is actually a really tragic, horrible subject, and he can't understand people who are obsessed with it or like it. And at the time, I was kind of like, oh, I almost took offense, because I actually really counted myself among the people who like true crime. But I think that Appelman made a really good point. There was a crossroads that I was at about 5 years ago where I had the choice of deciding if I wanted to be a book editor or if I wanted to be a forensic scientist. I like to clue in and see what makes a criminal tick. I believe that much of what makes a criminal become a criminal has to do with their circumstances. It's not necessarily about being born a killer, although I will believe that most people that go that route and lack of empathy in their brain, they're a little bit more on the sociopathic side. But I will say that much of what turns a sociopath down that road has to do with their circumstances and what they nurture in their lives. And I think that nurture has a lot to do with it. When I made that decision to become an editor, I made the right decision. My husband actually told me that it would probably turn me very cynical. I would see a side of humanity that would probably harm my spirit. And I think he's right. I think it would really have done a lot of harm. And after meeting Appelman and hearing his experience, I totally agree. I think that I made the right decision, because Appelman's experience is illustrated in this book, The Kill Jar, and he goes through his childhood, which wasn't very happy. He goes through the abuse that he's been through. While he doesn't really call it abuse, and he doesn't really point fingers or blame anybody for what he's been through, but you can tell that he's been scarred. Those scars run deep. And about the time that he was growing up is when this killer came to the forefront. And so it has severely rippled into his life. It's rippled into the whole town, I would say. And, I honestly believe that criminals need to understand and be taught that when they perpetrate a crime, they're not only impacting the victim, but the victim's family, the victim's neighborhood, the victim's town. I mean, it ripples and ripples and ripples. And so you can see how these ripples have affected Appelman. If you really want to get into the true crime side of it, watch the series Children of the Snow. It is really, really well done. Appelman's research and the details of this case come out in that series, along with the victims and the victim's family. And it really kind of weaves in and out of what really was going on in the big picture of this whole case. Not just necessarily these murders, but how it actually just was stemming from such a much larger problem. The Kill Jar is really about Appelman and about what he's been through and how this case impacted him personally. And I think that if people take the perspective of that when they take this book in, they will actually get a lot more out of this book than they probably would have if they had approached it as like, I'm reading about a true crime. The substance of the book is fantastic. I really, really enjoyed Appelman's writing style. I would say out of a 5-star, I would give this about a 4.8. The reason I'm holding back is because it took me a few chapters to kind of get into his flow. And I think it was more or less, I don't know if it was because of how I was coming off of other books or what was going on, but I really just it took me a couple chapters to kind of get into his voice. And then once I did, it flowed nicely. So the book overall was fantastic. There's a lot of characterization. There's a lot of internal dialogue. There's a lot of introspective reflection on what's going on and what's gone on in his life and how it actually has impacted him. I will say the most poignant part of the whole book was when he was having a discussion with his dad, and he was on a drive with his dad, and his dad said something about, he took a jab, and he said something about how he didn't know which way north was. You don't even know which way north is. And he took a minute before he retorted, but he then said that he'd gotten lost once, and he didn't need to know which way north was because he had Google Maps. He said north is up. And that impacted me and actually kind of set out it really set the whole book up in a theme. I really, really can relate to north is up. And I've actually used it from that point, from the time I've read this book to now, which has been a few months. I've been using this as an idiom actually, because perspective really has so much to do with our life. And that's what this book is about. It's about what Appelman went through, becoming an adult, reflecting on his childhood, the demons that he had, the darkness that was going on in his life, the depression, and the issues that he had to work out with his marriage, with his kids, with his self. He was just so haunted. This is kind of almost like a cathartic release, to search and seek after this killer and figure out who the heck, did this to these kids. And I can see how that might have been a way for Appelman to exorcise his own demons. And the point of this book is to help you understand how deeply impacted we are by other people's decisions. I truly enjoyed this book. I would recommend this book to anybody who wants to write about true crime, because I honestly believe that it will help you empathize with not only those that are directly impacted by the crime, but those who are indirectly impacted. And while Appelman wasn't maybe directly impacted, he certainly was sideswiped. He has a lot of childhood memories that could have very well led to him becoming one of the victims. And so I completely understand why he would have been haunted by this case, and I really appreciate that he shared this story. I hope that he's on a path for healing. Last year, he still seemed deeply disturbed by having to go out and constantly speak about this case while he, wanted to just put it to bed. Because once you stare into the abyss and the abyss stares back at you, you don't want to keep looking at it. And I can see why Appelman would like to set this aside. It is one of those books that should be approached with the right mindset, instead of thinking that you're going to read a crime novel. I want you to approach it with the glasses on that you're going to be reading a memoir. I really appreciate meeting Appelman. I really appreciate him requesting me to do this review. I think that he's an awesome author. Again, his book is called The Kill Jar. This book is available on Amazon. It's available on bookstores all over the world. It's available on Audible. When I read his book on Audible, I will say that I wouldn't rate it as highly. But it has nothing to do with Appelman's book. It has everything to do with his narrator. His narrator, when you hear somebody's soul, when they've been deeply impacted by something and they have shared that, you can hear the ghosts. His narrator, I felt like he sounded too old, and I felt like he was a little more peppy than I would imagine somebody who was going through something as traumatic as Appelman was going through would feel. So it felt like it didn't quite match. However, it was easy for me to get past, and so I'd rate his Audible book probably about a 4.5. I hope you've enjoyed this book review. If you want to check out any more of my book reviews, I have them on my channel, Read Write Random, and I would really love it if you would subscribe. I hope you guys have a fabulous week, and I will see you next time.